guys been asking me some really good questions, and I was asked a question by I can't think of the name of the actual commenter, but I did inform him that I was going to cover this topic. Now, the question I was asked was, what is the difference between pay when it comes to working for a small to mid to large size company? I have worked for all companies of those sizes. And I'm not only going to tell you the difference in cost, well, the difference in salary, but also the difference in the experience, the social relationships, what type of crap you can expect on the job, and the things you need to just be aware of as an employee. So let's get into it. So I'm going to talk about it in this order. I'm going to discuss small to mid to large. Now, working for a small size company, honestly, the salary is going to vary based off the state that you're in, and then also the funding of that small size company. A company that small size could offer you anything from 40 to 60 starting, or they could offer you about 80, depending on where the state that startup is in, and like I said, how much funding they have. Now, that's what they have on paper. That may not necessarily be what you actually get paid. The biggest thing you need to watch for in general when you're working for a small size company is that you get paid, period. So if I'm working for a small size company, I would keep in mind, I at least will have the mindset that there's a good chance that I won't be paid. So that means that when you are paid, make sure you have a good chunk of that money that's like stored away. Don't start buying a lot of different things, or paying, I'll say you're in like credit card debt or you have some kind of debt. Don't put all that money into that card yet. Have cash on hand, because there's a good chance that they may not pay you, or they'll pay you less than what they originally paid you. And a lot of these companies, sometimes they have these contract companies. They have these contracts, and they'll hire you for a specific period of time, and then that contract will go over that period of time, and they aren't willing to renegotiate that contract. So when you work for a small size company, you have to be mindful of your pay, and you have to be mindful of just like the leadership. Because if you're not getting paid, that just shows that it's always poor management. But a lot of times, like I said, these people, it's a startup, so a lot of these people, this is their first go around, this is the first time figuring things out. Dishonesty might be there. So there's a good chance that you might not be paid. So I would keep that in mind when I'm working for a small size company, which is most likely a startup. And also, just because a company is a small size company, it doesn't mean that it's a startup. There's companies that go from small to mid to large, but that's all dependent on the goals of the people who founded that company. A company could be a small size company and still be very profitable. So I would look at how long that small size company has actually been around. If it's been around for about 5+ years, then you're working for a pretty good company, even though it is a small size. Now, if it's a very good company and it's small size, there's a good chance that they're going to pay you pretty well. By pretty well, I'll say pretty, I won't use pretty well, I'll say they're pretty dependent when it comes to paying. So you can expect to get paid, say as a junior developer. If you're a junior developer, you work for a small size company, you're going to get paid about 40 to 60. If you have about 5 years of experience and you work for a small size company, you're going to get paid about 80. That's the truth. A small size company, about 80 is pretty good. If you're getting paid more than that, it's usually because you've been with that company for a long period of time, or you have like super high recommendations. They really like you a lot. For whatever reason, they really want you around to actually bring that company to the next level. Now, if you're working for a mid-sized company, you're going to deal with a lot of the same things you're going to deal with at a small size company, with the exception of it's promised you will get paid. Now, let's say you have about a few years of experience, let's say 5. If you have about 5 years of experience and you're working for a mid-sized company, it's all dependent on the state. But let's just say you're living in a state like a California, New York, or Chicago, or Florida, Texas. You should be getting paid about 110. And I was getting paid around there from a mid-level size company, about 110. Now, when you're working for one of these mid-sized level companies, what you can expect in the workplace is that it's going to be more of a homey feel, because the company is big, but it's not too big. So then you can have a closer relationship with your coworkers, you have a closer relationship with your supervisors, and also even like the CTO, the guys in that company. Now, all companies have written rules and they have unwritten rules. If you're working for a small size company, they're just trying to survive. Especially if they're a startup, they're just trying to survive. If it's a small size company, there's going to be a lot more flexibility as well. But when you're working for a mid-sized level company, there's a lot more stability. So when there's a lot more stability, people kind of show their true colors a little bit more. So it can be a hit or miss. I've worked for a mid-sized level company where the people were just awesome. Honestly, it was just really peaceful. It was easy for me to contact anybody when I needed some help, get clarification on anything. But I've also worked for a company that they had like these little cliques and people got really gossipy, and that's because people were comfortable. They had time to drift, and their mind can go in different places. So those are things that you need to be aware of. Unwritten rules and written rules where you're working for a mid-sized level company. And unfortunately, sometimes when these unwritten rules are negative, that's usually what prevents the company from going from a mid-sized level company to a large-scale size company. And I also want to note that if you don't have 5 years of experience, you work for a mid-sized level company, you can expect to get about, I want to say, anywhere from 50 to 70. As a junior, a pure junior, 50 to 70. The thing that's going to get you into that position is not necessarily the tools that you know. It's going to be if you're a culture fit. If you have the skills and people need your skills, there's a good chance they're going to hire you. But when you work for a mid-sized level company, like I said, there's unwritten rules and there's a culture. So you have to just be a cultural fit. And I don't want to hear any of the it's because of my religion, my race, or whatever. You always, whether it's a friendship, a romantic relationship, or you're working for a company, you always want to put yourself around people who want you. So I've had interviews where I did awesome, people didn't call me back, and I know why. It's because for one person, I could not have been liked. I could not have been a cultural fit. And I could have been around whining about that, but no, peace of mind is everything. So as a developer, the best thing is that you're always going to get interviews. All right, that's a promise. So keep in mind, as I stated, keep in mind that when you're going for these job interviews, the most important thing is that you are a cultural fit. Now, if you're working for a large size company, it's promised that you're going to get 6 figures. Reason being, at least in America, all the large size companies, they're in states like California, Texas, New York, Florida, and I think that's about it. Those are the biggest tech corporations are in those states. So it's promised that you're going to get 6 figures because the cost of living is high and it's a large size company, so they can afford it. Now, on a social level, when you're working for a large size company, don't expect too much drama. I wouldn't, because there's a reason why a company goes from a mid-sized company to a large-sized company, and that's because they did a really good job at controlling the company's culture. They controlled the energy in that environment, and they've allowed put in a position where it can grow. I know there's a lot of drama that we hear that goes on in these large-sized companies, but that's because all the spotlight is on them, and then when you're winning, everybody wants to take you down. They have lawsuits, and you hear every little thing that happens within that company. But I promise you, a large-sized company, they have a few hundred, if not 1,000 employees. They're managing all these people. On top of that, they're managing their managers. You could be working for a company like Walmart, where there's like 1,000 Walmarts, hundreds of Walmarts all over the country. Yeah, because it's so micro, like a McDonald's. It's so micro that it's not necessarily the large corporation that you're working for, but you're working for that small entity within that specific location. But if you're working for like a Facebook, you're working for an Amazon or something like that, there's a good chance that as a developer, you're going to be working on a small portion of that application, but you're not going to have to actually deal with too much of like the company gossip. At least it won't really have an impact on your job as much. Google has this thing called True Colors, and basically it's like a mental exercise to get a feel for who you are as a person, how you handle stress, and how you deal with projects, and how you communicate with people. So those companies, they already have a system in place that protects you from that. Now, I mentioned this in an earlier video, but when you're working for a a company or you're in the interview process, you need to have a good idea of what you're willing to get paid. Meaning you need to have a minimum and a maximum amount of money that you're expecting for that company. For me, at my experience level, my minimum is 120 and my maximum is 150. And I always start, I want to say, I'll put it at about 130 to 135 because it puts me in a position to negotiate. Companies they'll ask you for, what are you thinking for this position? Don't give them a direct price, never. Just say, this is my this is my minimum, this is my maximum. So at least it puts you in a position to negotiate. And also, if this is your first time, like the guy who recommended this is coming from a boot camp. If you're coming from a boot camp, you have to be prepared for the questions they're going to ask you. So the biggest, most popular question is, what is your strengths and weaknesses? When they say your strengths, they want to know what are your strengths when it comes to development. When you say weaknesses, they want to know your weaknesses when it comes to development. You know, and then you can easily say something like, please don't copy this, but I really want you to think about it. You could say something like, you know, well, I feel like my weakness is, like, I'm weak in pretty much every area. And what I mean by that is that I feel like there's always something to learn within these areas. I'm pretty familiar with the language. I understand all the built-in functions. I know what is expected of me. But when it comes to actually architecting the application and then making sure it's stable and knowing how continuous integration works, that's something I feel like I can work on. My functional programming skills can always be better because we can always build algorithms that can actually help process that data a lot faster. But you really want to be, whatever company you're working for, you really want to have a good idea of what tools they're using, what's their tech stack, and if there's anything within their tech stack that you're not really good at, you want to make sure you map that as a weakness. I know for me personally, one of the last companies that I worked for, we did Node, Express, and Sequelize. A lot of these companies don't use Sequelize; they use GraphQL. You know, and a lot of them, and also a lot of React and React Native applications now are being built on TypeScript. So for me, I don't have that much experience with TypeScript. And I don't have that much experience with Jest. Even though I've used Jest, I've done testing on the back end, and I've done a little bit of testing on front, just not as much as I've done on the back end. So because of that, when I'm in the interview process, they know I have the experience, and they know that I know as much as I've been able to learn. So I know for a company, for example, I told them, like, hey, I don't know GraphQL that much, and I don't know TypeScript. I'm familiar with TypeScript, and I built projects where I was expecting to use TypeScript, but for whatever reason, we didn't implement it. So I don't have that much professional experience with TypeScript. And that's what I've been working with recently. But anyways, if you have any more questions, if that wasn't clear, if you have anything, just leave a comment. And if the comment is cool enough, I'll definitely make a video about it. But anyways, like, comment, subscribe. Thank you for watching. Peace.